Hey, what's up? Brett here, bringing you another quick battle for Total War Warhammer 2. I'll be playing as the High Elves today against a greenskin opponent. And I wanted to cast this game and showcase it because I didn't play my best this game. I made quite a few mistakes. And I noticed quite a few things that my opponent did that had they not done these things, they would have had a much easier go this game. So let me start by introducing my units and kind of explaining them quickly. I'm going to go ahead and put this in slow-mo because I am going to start scouting here with my princess. I took a princess on a moon dragon, and I took this because knowing the meta, my opponent was going to take one of two lord choices. It was either going to be Wurzag here with Effigy of the Git, looking to lock down my lord and then focus fire, or it was going to be Azag with Lore of Death up on his Wyvern flying mount. So knowing that, if my opponent took Wurzag, I was going to be able to take the princess on the dragon, be stronger than Wurzag in melee, but also have the ability to skirmish from the skies safely. And if they took Azag, I could basically just run my princess around, keeping her a safe distance from him and his Wyvern mount. So took her. I'm scouting here. At this point, my opponent's Night Goblin units are invisible to me, and they just become revealed. I have been using my Eagle Claw bolt throwers to harass these Black Orcs, and I know at this point I'm not seeing much of anything, so I'm either suspecting that my opponent has Vanguard units or units hidden in the forest, or they have a large contingent of Night Goblin units that I'm not able to see. And that's going to be confirmed for me. As I get a little closer, I'm able to see the Rusty Arrows and the Night Goblin Archers, which are a very dangerous firing squad with Wurzag. So I'm kind of able to see them at the last second, which puts me danger close to this firing squad. And you're going to see I'm going to pay for that in a second. Wurzag is going to use his Effigy of the Git, which is basically most of the reason you bring him. It's going to lock me down and allow these range units to take a lot of fire at me. Now, I brought the build that I did because greenskins hardly ever bring artillery. So boom, just one or two pieces and I win the artillery game. Greenskins hardly ever bring more than the Rusty Arrows and one or two accompanying ranged units as part of their background skirmishing firing line. So I went ahead and went a bit heavier with my firing line to win that fight. High Elf archer units have greater range than greenskins, so most of the time in my experience, before the greenskin firing line can even get to within firing range of your front line, your 180 ranged archer units can basically just knock them off the field. And you're going to see that happen as my opponent advances. I took Lothern Seaguard in the flanks, expecting some sort of cavalry, whether it be cheap Goblin Wolf Rider units or, heavier Boar Cav units. These guys end up doing quite a bit of work this game. For those of you who don't know, they're actually basically spear units with slightly lower range than standard archers, but they do have charge defense against large, so keeping them on your flanks to protect against cavalry is usually a good option, and I took two of them here. So in a pinch, they're decent melee units, and they're also just great archers. My front line is very bare bones. It is an alternating line of spearmen and white lions. You have to expect when you're going up against greenskins to either be facing a mass goblin army, which is something I see quite often, or an army that is heavily invested in Black Orcs. Now you'll see my opponent is retreating with his Black Orcs. I didn't do too much damage to them. I was basically just softening them up with my Eagle Claw bolt throwers, but this is going to be the kind of the catalyst for my opponent's major mistake this game. Wanting to preserve the life totals of these three Black Orc units, my opponent drew them all the way back, so far back from their line as to be out of range, but by bringing them so far back, when they went ahead to engage my front line, they were too far back. And if you've ever played this game, if you've ever played games like this, you'll understand that a staggered attack into an opponent's very well organized kind of flat front line is usually going to result in a lot of problems for you. Your goblins here are meant to soak up fire with their silver shields on the approach from these archers, so that by the time your black orcs get into the fight, their heavy hitting armor piercing damage is able to actually win that fight for you. But if you just engage the night goblins and then slowly follow up with the black orcs, these guys are going to get beat long before these guys are able to show up. So we'll watch that happen as it happens. And then for my kind of hero core, I took the Lore Master of Hoeth. He's an incredibly tanky caster unit, and he looks pretty awesome. I like to leave him standing out in front of my army. I find that if he gets focused, it's great because he just pops an Earth Blood kind of in the center of this pocket, and a lot of your opponent's early DPS is wasted on him. And if he gets ignored, what ends up happening is he lives until the late game long enough to be one of the last units on the field, and at that point he's just nearly impossible to take down. And I also opted to take one noble as my artillery defense mobile anti-large contingent. And I have to say my army was pretty well suited to deal with my opponent's army if I didn't make one of the major mistakes that I made, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean as the battle progresses. So I went over the firing line, I went over my opponent's front line of damage absorbing night goblins who also apply poison. Their cav contingent is 2 orc boy biggins. Really powerful melee cav. Now I'm not contesting the cav game with dragon princes or Lyrian reavers or silver helms or any of the cav that the high elves have. So these guys are going to really struggle to find a home against a front line and even a back line that consists of anti-large charge defense against large spear units. I also, at this point, I'm going to start, you'll see here I just switched over my artillery. I'm going to change its mode from this scattershot anti-infantry mode into a more single target DPS mode. It's the alternating mode. It's one of the great benefits of the Eagle Claw boat throwers. It's kind of what they get in exchange for lesser range. And my opponent has a single artillery piece, the Regiment of Renown, the Hammer of Gork. Very accurate, and I believe it has a unique missile damage debuff, and I want to say it's not allowing me to click on it to go ahead and read that for you, but I want to say it's a leadership penalty that it does apply. So my opponent is advancing, but they're leaving their black orcs behind, and they're gonna pretty quickly realize that and bring them forward, but it'll end up being something like too little too late. So after taking all that focus fire from my princess, I'm going to just pull her back. I did manage to get a pretty good breath attack off with this moon dragon, and I was able to take these guys down to about half HP. Kill off quite a few models. And now she's just going to sit here with her ranged weapon and shoot. My opponent I did notice the moment he targeted the Hammer of Gork to my white lions, so I backed them up just enough out of this artillery piece's range that it would have to actually stop firing to scoot forward. So that was a bit of a nice little micro play for me. And it's back online, and the first boulder you'll see it comes in here.
For the king.
So my opponent's now moving up the black orcs, and a lot of this fire is being absorbed by these night goblins. So this part of my opponent's plan is being executed very well.
Maintaining order.
My Everqueen's Courtyard, probably the strongest unit that I have on the field. It has Encourage, which is great for your kind of lower leadership units in the back line. These guys will pretty much, well, these ladies, they'll pretty much always fight to the death.
It shall be.
Their leadership is that good. And they do tons of armor piercing, magic, and fire damage. So I'm not going to try and, quote unquote, conserve ammunition against these silver shield having night goblins. I'm just going to do whatever damage I can before they engage my front lines, and then switch on to the range units, the Rusty Arrows, and the Night Goblin Archers, and you can see I did enough damage to break them. I'm going to catch these Orc Boy Biggins as they run across the lines. At this point, you can't
Assyrian
really
does
tell,
it.
but I'm very
Hear me.
quickly microing my archer units and trying to maximize the damage that I'm doing, just enough to break them, force them to run off, and then I'm switching targets. These Orc Boy Biggins managed to slightly skirt around my Lothern Sea Guard, which I turned and braced for the charge, expecting my opponent to charge. And just in case I wasn't able to catch them, I brought my Noble to intercept them. And the Noble is anti-large. He's going to do good work against these guys with his halberd. And you'll see they're killing them off. They're freeing up my artillery. My artillery, I actually pulled these guys off the artillery piece and then brought them back so that they wouldn't sustain too much damage. A nice foot of Gorp there from my opponent. It's more meant against large units, cavalry, but in that instance it did a ton of damage. You'll see it did about 75% damage to these archers. It didn't kill a lot of models, thankfully, so my archers are still actually at pretty near maximum firing effectiveness. Another nice breath attack. I'm being very conservative with my princess. She is a ranged unit, so even when it looks like she's just kind of sitting over here not doing anything, she is firing her bow at targets. That breath attack was into the flank of these black orcs, so I was able to maximize kind of the arc of fire there. So we're actually being crumbled in the center. Now that these black orcs have made it to the front lines, they are crushing our center. Spearmen are not made to fight black orcs, black arcs, or they are extremely high DPS damage units. And at this point I've won the range game, and I just need to protect these artillery pieces that still have like half of their ammunition. And the Everqueen's Court Guard are not pushovers in melee, so I'm going to let them fight. I don't really have a choice. Their sacrifice here is allowing me to use these Lothern Sea Guards to fire into the back of these black orcs.
Acknowledged. Yes.
Understood.
Now here's the mistake I made.
Advance.
I allowed my Noble to chase off one of the Orc Boy units all the way to the edge of the map, and then I forgot about it. I was so busy microing my back line, returning these routing units, trying to set up inner crossing fields of fire into this kind of center pocket, that I completely missed my Noble, and that was a huge mistake. My Lore Master of Hoeth has been doing great work in the front lines here. He basically didn't move. He has not moved since the battle has started. He's gotten 28 kills. A lot of that has been on these black orcs, and he's absorbed a ton of damage. In this whole battle, he's been casting heals and an AoE with Earth Blood. He was casting it earlier on this flank when my princess was effigied of the Gid for the second time. He actually just went down here with a charge from Wurzag on his Mount Spleen Ripper, who actually does pretty decent melee damage for a caster. Now there I used my third and final breath attack, hoping Wurzag would kind of eat that to the face, but he did not. It whiffed. So had I waited a few seconds, kind of positioned myself here, and then did a breath attack down this line, using these Lothern Sea Guard as a bit of an anvil for that, it would have been devastating, but as it was wasted. My opponent's Hammer of Gork fired the entire fight, got 59 kills, and now is running forward, dropping its artillery piece. And I am using these routed archer units to as great of effect as I can. I've got them spread out. I'm not just trying to, you'll see what a lot of newer players do. They'll see these units and they'll want to just put them together in a nice line. They want to group them because it's easier to micro that way. But sometimes it's better to keep them where they're managing to rally, and then find something for them to do from that position, because this spread out, my opponent's core is stronger than mine. If he was able to sit on his full health lord, his goblin big boss, and his remaining black orcs and just death ball around, or have a single target to hit, I would be very vulnerable. But having all of this interlapping fields of fire has been very beneficial to me. It's allowing me to pick these guys off. Now, my opponent for some reason wanted to, well, not for some reason, in his mind I think he wanted to rout off these archers, and Big Boss with most of its health is definitely a match for some injured archers. However, that did leave him very open to a single charge from the princess, which was enough to break him. And I've brought the prince back at this point. He kind of did a little fight over here. He routed some
They
units,
die.
and then I was bringing him in for an alpha strike on Wurzag, but you know, it was too little too late. He didn't get the value that I really needed him to get in order for this fight to go smoothly. Had my opponent not engaged with a staggered Black Orc Night Goblin front line, had he engaged all at once, he would have instantly broken my front line, and I would have desperately needed that noble to run interference from my archers, to protect certain units from big bosses, or Wurzag himself, or you know, honestly, just to die, just to run into a group of Black Orcs, soak the damage so that I could then get a concave with my archers and do that damage that way. So, good game for my opponent. We both made pretty devastating, game-altering, you know, mistakes there, but you do learn more from your mistakes than you do from your failures, the saying goes. And constantly remembering to check for routing units or units that are not in the position where you want them to be is what is going to separate you from, you know, being a good player versus a great player. So I'm a little rusty. Like most people, I think I kind of put this game down whenever the DLC or whatever gets a little old. I have thousands of hours into this game. I've pretty much done everything to death. And as much as I love it, I don't want to burn myself out on it, because when that next DLC drops, when, you know, Total War Warhammer 3 drops, I want to feel just as excited as I did, you know, every time those other DLCs came out. So I try to give myself that break in between. But if you guys are enjoying this content, I am more than happy to jump back in it, keep my skills fresh, and practice and get better. And even when I'm not playing, I'm still following the meta. I'm still watching other YouTubers that, you know, are actively following and sometimes even creating the meta. So I'll still be able to give some insight because I am, you know, constant. I'm staying in it. I'm staying in the game. So let's kind of do a quick overview of what performed and what didn't. I used my princess this game basically as a mobile terror platform, and I got a good bit of advantage from the breath attacks. Probably could have went with the cheaper Sun Dragon. Saved a few hundred gold. I thought the Everqueen's Courtyard did excellent. They kept a lot of my backline units from routing, and if you saw them at the end of the battle, I believe they only had 3 models left, and they were still fighting. So that's pretty much what you get when you pay for these guys. Lore Master did exactly what I wanted him to do. He anchored the front line. He took all the damage, and he healed these guys just enough to keep them in the fights long enough for our archers to win through sheer DPS. Opponent had some pretty solid spell casting. You'll notice he did use a lot of brain busters that fight. He had a good assortment of spells. Wurzag is definitely great in that way. His utility is very high. His Foot of the Gork would have allowed him to crush a cavalry battle. His Brain Buster is just a solid cheap spell to trigger his passive, which applies a map-wide buff to all of his units every time he casts a cheap spell like Brain Buster. So that's a lot of value there. And Effigy to Get, which is that lockdown ability, was great this game. Had he not had that, my princess basically would have had free reign. Probably wouldn't have taken any damage throughout the course of that entire fight. At least not any damage that I couldn't have quickly healed up. I like Hammer of Gork. I see in the meta right now there's pretty much no love for greenskin infantry, greenskin artillery rather, and I can understand why. Whenever you go to make a build, one of the important things to remember is to keep it focused. You know, you have to ask yourself, what do you want your build to do? What fights are you trying to win? And the greenskins are excellent at winning the frontline battle. So you want to play into your strengths, and taking even a single piece of artillery, even one as efficient as the Hammer of Gork, you know, this could be this could be 2 orc boys, you know, that can overwhelm the front line. Um, So taking an artillery piece in a very rush-centric format meta right now for the greenskins is a little questionable, but I value the efficiency of certain units, especially certain regiment of renown units. And this got a very respectable 59 kills, and was still on the field by the end of the battle. So, without further ado, it was an excellent game, and thanks to Tim the Toolman Taylor. God, I miss Home Improvement. I'm sure a lot of you guys used to watch that show, if you're about as old as me. I'll see you guys in the next one, and let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for builds or anything else you'd like to see on my channel. Alright guys, thanks a lot, and I will see you in the next one.